For this presentation, we're going to look at the room controller as an all-in-one solution for our customers. Whether that's HVAC related or otherwise, there needs to be a control in a room for the client. This is applicable to the residential market, but it could also be suitable for the commercial environment as well. Simplicity is always best. Automation could mean complexity. We have a lot of functions that we want to actually control: lighting, dimming control, phase dimmed, dially dimmed, 1 to 10 volt dimmed, switching circuits from lots of different manufacturers. All these need controlling. Heating, we have underfloor heating controllers from many manufacturers. We have radiator controllers. All these need controlling simply yet efficiently. Air conditioning, there are many interfaces available now for interfacing from lots of manufacturers. So Intensis and Zennio, Coolmaster can interface to all the air conditioning manufacturers out there. Daikin, Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, all of them. And there's all the fan coils as well. So even if it's not an independent air conditioning system, KNX is very good at interfacing to fan coil units. And all those blinds and curtains that are being controlled by lots of different manufacturers, actuators, again, they all need to be controlled from a central point. And that's the beauty of KNX, of course. We can bring together all of these different manufacturers. The interworking of KNX means that we can actually interface to all these different systems simply. There are a lot of things going on in our room. The lighting, if we have a lot of circuits in the room, we don't want to overload the user. If he's got 10 circuits, we don't want having to switch 10 switches to turn them on. So we'll use mood lighting. One button will control multiple circuits. Heating. What does he really need to do in his room? He needs to set the temperature. We've all seen the rotary room thermostat. All it does is set a temperature. So let's make it nice and straightforward and simple for him. We just need up and down on the temperature. Air conditioning. All these self-contained units regulate their temperatures very well. They've been designed to do that. So what do we need from our room controller? We need to turn it on and off and let the automatic settings of the air conditioning work. Conversely, with fan coils, of course, we control that through a KNX thermostat. So again, that is under control. Blinds and curtains, of course, the system will be there doing the dusk, dawn, via brightness sensors or astro timers, and then we might have sun sensors for daytime closing. But of course, we always need a manual override for the blind, so let's make that available for the user. We want to make it straightforward so that he can actually get to these settings, he can control them, but he's happy that things are happening as he expects. So light control, one scene button to control the actual scenes themselves. And we want to know that the heating and the air conditioning aren't operating at the same time. So because we're controlling from one local room controller, we've got peace of mind that if the heating is on, the cooling is off, and if the cooling is on, the heating is off. So that is locked out within our room controller. Blinds, we want that control near the door where the user comes into the room, so he's got direct control of the blinds. All these different systems could mean that we could end up with a lot of wall-mounted devices to control the separate functions. Without KNX, we might have a separate light switch, separate room thermostat, a separate controller for the air conditioning, and a separate controller for the blinds. But KNX will allow us to put all those together into a single unit. Therefore, that single unit can then be part of the room design. You know, we've given back the choice of decoration, style, finish to the designer of the room, the client, so that he can match the product to the room and give his input into the aesthetics of it. He doesn't have to have a white plastic box on the wall. He can match it to the decorations that are required. But of course, as installers, we don't want to lose sight of what's behind the room controller on the wall. There's still all the complexity there that we need to make the system work. Scene setting is available. If we have a system visualization set up, the client can set up the scenes on a smartphone app or on a visualization. So he's set his room lighting as he requires, and he knows that when he goes to the room controller in that room, those scenes will be as he's set. So that complexity is there, but when you get to the room, it's a simple operation. The heating timer that changes between night and day is within the visualization and within the app. And again, that's not required on the room controller, but it's there in the background. The cooling, the air conditioning regulates its own temperature in the enclosed units, or it's controlled by our KNX thermostat in the fan coils. And of course, the blinds are controlled by dusk dawn sensors or astro timers or sun shadings with the brightness sensors. How do we achieve this? What kind of products are available? Well, there are a lot of manufacturers choosing to make this type of room controller. We have choices that the customer might make. Do we want button controls with mechanical feedback, or is a touch switch or a touch control the preferred option? These days, everyone's used to smartphones and touch screens. Do they want a touch screen on the wall, or do they want buttons that give them that feedback that they've pressed an operation? So as a distributor, we can offer many different manufacturers. So I'm going to look at a few of those here. The first one is from JUNG, the F50 series, a classic design. Button controls. The room controller gives you 8 buttons, so you can use those for the functions that we've been describing. And of course, it has a display, so it will give you the temperature, and it will give you icons for the buttons. And they do offer an engraving service for the buttons, so you can give the customer the legends of what each button does. So instead of blank buttons, the customer has the direct information of what's going on for each button. So typically we might get a room controller set up like this. The top two buttons do the room on and off. So he comes into the room, he can switch his room on, he can switch his room off in terms of lighting. And he could dim up and down the whole room set of lighting. And then we put on the most important scenes that he uses. So we've got a couple of scene buttons there on the second row, and that gives him the basic setups for his room in terms of his lighting control. The display tells him the room temperature, and he's got his up and down buttons on the third row for the temperature. So he can turn his temperature up, he can turn his temperature down. So we've got lighting and heating directly from our room controller. Air conditioning, we can have as a simple on-off toggle button, and that can light up when the air conditioning comes on. And we know, because of the room functions, the thermostat functions, that when the air conditioning comes on, the heating will go off. And that gives us the last button for the blinds to do the manual override of the automatic blind systems. So we've put together a very complex set of controls, but we've put them into a nice, straightforward, simple setup. How does that look inside ETS? What's behind it all? Again, that is a fairly straightforward setup. For our top rocker, we've got room on and off and dim up and down. So we have switching, we've got our room on off, and we've got our room dimming. So both of those are a very straightforward setup within ETS. And then we've got our scene recalls. So we've got simply here a scene extension recalling the scenes that we've set up in our dimming actuators elsewhere in our KNX installation. So those scenes are held in the actuators, and of course we can set them up with a visualization or a smartphone app, so the customer can have his complete control of what those scenes are going to be. On the third rocker, we have the Setpoint Temperature control, and if we look inside the parameters of the room controller, buttons 5 and 6 give us the option to do the temperature set point shift. So we can reduce the set point on button 5 and we can increase the set point on button 6. And that just makes it very easy for the customer to control his temperature. We can make it a lot more intuitive. We can put the minus icon next to the down and the plus icon next to the up. And we can even use the colors of the LEDs next to the buttons. So we've got blue for down and red for up. It makes it nice and intuitive for the user, and it becomes straightforward. The last rocker, AC on off, we want to ensure that when the air conditioning is on, the underfloor heating is off. So we don't want to have both on together, and it's a manual switchover or an automatic switchover. How do we do that? I've given them a manual switchover here. We're controlling the heating and cooling option with the button. That goes straight into the thermostat. So it changes the thermostat from heating to cooling through that option. It's a manual choice, so the customer remains in charge of the building. If it's an automatic switchover, the building is in charge, but here we're giving the customer the choice whether he has the air conditioning on. Of course, behind the scenes, we have to actually make sure that the air conditioning comes on, because our heating cooling Logic is the opposite way round. Heating is 1, cooling is 0, and we have to invert that with logic to turn the air conditioning on. So that mustn't be forgotten within the programming. But for the user, that is completely hidden, of course. The thermostat within the room controller is there, and that is doing all the things we would expect it to do of a thermostat. We have the room temperature available to us. We can send that to the visualization that we've got. We have the operating mode, so we can switch between night and day. And of course, we can timer it as well, so that we have a global switchover between night and day. We have our heating and cooling switchover, as I've mentioned, and the statuses will come out again for our visualization, so that it can always give us the correct information. So we have our heating indication, our cooling indication, and we're only sending out the controls for the heating to the underfloor. We're not sending it for the cooling because the air conditioning regulates itself, so we don't need to control that. If we had fan coils, we could activate the fan output and send the fan controls directly to the fan coils. So we can do all of those interactions from this room controller. And then of course we can set the temperature directly from the room controller, but we can also set it from the visualization using the set point shifting. So the set point we cyclically send, so the visualization is always up to date, and therefore the room controller becomes part of the system. Our visualization knows what's going on, and it all works seamlessly. So I've put together the detail there for the JUNG room controller, but of course there are other manufacturers' room controllers. Gira have a similar one, their push button 3 controller. You can set up room on off, scenes, change the temperature, and have nice finishes and engraved buttons. So again, it's all into the one device. We can control the many features that we want from that device. How about a touchscreen, such as the Takio from ABB? We have, again, 8 functions here. So we've got room on off, scenes, temperature up and down, air conditioning on and off, blind control. So glass finish, a touchscreen, and factory engraved buttons. So again, the aesthetics of the room become part of the design, not just the functionality of the devices. Do we want a bit more behind our touchscreen rather than just a few buttons? Do we want a menu behind it? You know, do we want our visualization to be part of that room controller? I mean, we're making it nice and simple at the top level. The user can come in, press the button on the screen, but if we want the detail, we can drill down through the menus and then get to that detail. So Siemens, with their new touchscreen, as demonstrated previously, is a possibility. How about a touchscreen that also has an app? Take the Zennio Z41 Pro, for instance. Again, we can have the front page with the buttons that we've decided are there to use the room. So the front page can be our room controllers, and again we can go down through a menu structure to the detail behind it. And this particular one does an app that replicates the screen on a smartphone. How about a high quality hand finished device, touch switch, touch controller from Tense, the Infinity range. Each corner will do the functions we've described. We can do room on off, we can do scenes, we can do the air conditioning on off, we can do the blinds, and we can see the temperature on the display. So all that is there with a high quality finish, so we can match again the aesthetics and the design detail we want for our buildings. So to bring it all into conclusion, the KNX Room Controller will bring together all the different systems that we want in an installation. It can control all of them from that single point in the room. It makes it straightforward for the customer to operate it. It becomes a simple, straightforward thing. He doesn't have to have a degree in engineering to actually control his room. He's got a good, simple, straightforward interface to actually control some very complicated systems and building automations that are hiding behind the scenes. And the aesthetics of it become part of the room design. And the user then does get a better experience of control automation, and he likes it rather than having to battle with it. So there we have the room controller. Make it work for you when you install it, because the customer will thank you for it. So, okay, thank you for your attention. And if you want to contact us, here's our contact details. And if you want to learn more about KNX training, HVAC training, advanced course training, you're welcome to join us.